Baroness Stone is our second review, and I think this is one that a lot more people will be like highly anticipated because, I mean, for a start, it's their first non-color coded record. The artwork, as you know, it's again mentioned with the previous review, but it's lovely, and you know, even having a more varied color palette within it, it's like, oh yeah, damn, John Baisley, you can fucking paint,
draw,
can't he?
Yeah.
I definitely have this very close feeling with Baroness of being one of the most special rock bands of like our lifetimes of listening to music. I know we did the album club recently on Yellow and Green, and we were raving about what like an incredible double record that is, but do you guys share that general sort of like that real warmth and closeness in feeling and love when it comes to Baroness?
It was a late developer, didn't come along till Purple for me, but yes.
Yeah, they're one of those bands where maybe more than anyone else, I just want them to succeed. And it was a thing where between Yellow and Green and then Purple, it looked like it could happen when they had like, the Grammy nomination and you know touring with big bands and the like. There is just something around Baroness where you're like, I want you to do well, and you can reliably expect their records to be great, but when you're putting on, you're like, I hope I love this.
That's generally, I think it's because they are just one of the best representatives that we could have for rock music and like how good it can be. You know, it's like if the wider world was taking Baroness as the standard of what good popular rock music should be, then it would be a better place. You know, several years on, how do you guys feel about Golden Grey? Has it revealed more sort of secrets to you over that time? And I would like you to avoid until the last possible moments of your statement using the word production.
I mean, I wish I liked Golden Grey more. I do think there are great moments on that record. There are great songs on that record. They just, without saying the word, it's great songs that don't sound good.
Yeah, it took a long time for me. Like Baroness records previously were like Love from the Off, and to have one arrive, like a sort of soft double record. And I could kind of tell early on that the songs were brilliant, but it took me about a dozen times to sort of push through it. I won't say the word, but the liter of Dr. Pepper that was spilled on the mixing desk. Like, I could tell that there were great songs wrapped in barbed wire, and I was straining to hear them. So it took me about a year from going, I don't know what I think, for a long time, to then going, I now see it as another great record in the lineage, but it has a serious caveat, which puts it at the bottom of the pile.
Yeah, I think that's fair. I think that's essentially how I feel myself. It's definitely the least I had like obsessively replayed a Baroness album since I got big into them. But more important, I think, than like obsessive listening when something drops, which we have a tendency to judge albums on at first, is the kind of consistent process where, you know, I wasn't always at it the way I was with Purple, but it's not like an album where I completely forgot it existed. And, you know, songs and refrains and ideas from it really stayed in my head, and going back to it on a, you know, a fairly consistent basis every now and then across those 4 years solidified it to me as an album of real quality and real worth. I won't even say, oh, it has great songs on it. It's pretty much all great songs. Musically, that album, front to back, is fucking great. They just shot themselves in the foot with how that record landed with people and the chances that people would give it to recognise that, because the discussion, and again, the discussion that could have been had around that record and the directions they'd taken it, because, you know, so much of that record was really delicate and intricate. It had a lot of their most, like, almost stripped back, melodically delicate songs to date, with that interplay between John and Gina, and then alongside some of their kind of weirder, proggiest experiments as well. But all of that discussion, either from that prog side or the more mainstream audience that might have been gone with them after Purple, it just washed away because of how difficult people found the record to listen to.
I mean, I think we've discussed in terms of albums where like a bad production job can just completely derail anything good in a lot of people's minds about an album, and there are bad production jobs that I've, you know, taken to heart to defend a lot, as we've discussed before, and so I get it, but a lot of people were so quick to judge the Golden Grey on that production job that it just meant that it became really difficult to have any discussion about it beyond that.
Yes, this album, mixed by Joe Barresi, who has done an awful lot of good work over the years. I think the most simplistic and boring way of reviewing this record would be to say the sonic job on it is much better than Golden Grey, so therefore it's a way better album. Everything is fixed again in Baroness Land. Wahoo! This album, I think, continues a real streak of unconventionality that existed on Golden Grey, but also manifests in different ways that make it feel quite different, and another very intriguing experimental chapter in the Baroness discography.
I'm quite relieved about that, to be honest, because Golden Grey, like you say, the conversation on it was so dominated by the production job, but there were so many weird deviations and stylish experiments on there. And so when the first single for this came out and it sounded great, obviously I was relieved because I knew I was going to like a Baroness record sound from the off. But there was a part of me that thought, I hope they don't just go and do something they've already done. And what's interesting to me about this record is that the sound is as accessible as Baroness have ever sounded, but they've come out with some of the most kind of like intentionally clumsy and strangest songs they've ever written.
I agree. It's the most metal album they've done for a start since, I guess, Blue. Golden Grey had some extreme moments, like, you know, there's a blast beat on a certain song and so on. But like I said, it was so often kind of the classic rock side of Purple kind of went further, and there are times where you almost like could forget that they were once a metal band. It's more difficult to do on this one because it's pretty heavy. Like, Last Word's riff is insanely sick. Like, the tone is unreal for a start, but more importantly as well, just the sheer gallop on it. That's the kind of riff that, you know, if Mastodon aren't doing it, Baroness are the other like peak band who are going to make that feel good, but they haven't done it like that in a little while.
Yeah, no, Last Word's just coming at you with that intensity of that riff. Beneath the Rose is the one where, like, straight afterwards, where that riff punches real hard whilst having this real, like, agile feeling to it. This is one of those albums that, for me, again, it did just hit that spot of, like, oh, hell yeah, big metallic riffs, but presenting these really interesting, sprawling songs. There's not, like, let's say it's more metallic, but it doesn't feel like a regression or a step backwards in kind of, like, simplifying it and just going back to being a big riff band. There's so many interesting turns they take these more metallic structures in. Yeah,
and I think that's absolutely in part because they maintain all of the, you know, melodic progressions that they've gained over the years. You know, the songs themselves feel different to how the songs on Red or Blue feel, but it is a heavier record, and they do have like Last Word, the same song will go all out prog for the latter half of like the 6-minute runtime with that kind of instrumental dexterity. Like, the guitar and rhythm section interplay in that outro is out of this world. Beneath the Rose, after, like, Last Word was the first single, when I put this on for the first listen, that was the proper wake-up call to how kind of out there Baroness have at this stage in their career the capability still to be, because that's an abrasive song, and it's not just because the recording is shit, but like that, like Henry Rollins sort of like slurred, booming, like sort of semi-spoken word vocal that John is doing on it. Never heard him do a vocal like that, and I think it's awesome. I wonder if it might split some people, but that like knocking on that like big tight palm muted riff has a legitimate kind of unhinged sort of quality that you might not give Baroness immediate credit for. It gives it this really kind of, you know, dangerous kind of rambling feel to the song that's really engaging, I think.
I love that vocal approach on that song. I think it's so, because John Mason, he had just such a commanding presence. Like, I love it when he's singing in, like, on Last One, him and Gina are doing the harmonized together, and it is beautiful. But when he is just taking command and doing that snarled, like almost quite like mean spoken word thing on Beneath Those, and again on Choir, where it gets really dark. I think it's really cool, and I was like, that's a really like different, darker route for Baroness to go down that still feels interesting to me.
It's a choice that alienated me at first, because going into that thrash sort of galloping riff, and it was so tight, and I thought, I've not heard Baroness sound this tight and mean in well over a decade. And then for John Basie to offset that with like that lazy enunciation and drawled quality, like it's almost like the music is beating him up. It's like the song is punchy and then he's punch drunk. Like you said, Henry Rollins, it reminded me of sort of argument era Fugazi. And the first couple of times I listened to it, I was like, I really don't know about this, because he's one of my favourite singers, and when he lets it fly, And he does later in the record, when he lets it fly, it's one of the best sounds there is. So there was a part of me going, I don't know if this is you playing to your strengths. By the time I got to like the third or fourth listen, and I kind of had adjusted to it, it's so cool.
Yeah.
As a change, it's so neat and exciting.
Yeah, and I love that Gina as well adds this like screaming dimension to the back end of that. And I love that, it will be so easy for people to go, oh yeah, you've got this like vocal harmony element now. Do lots of pretty slow songs together with Gina's beautiful voice, and they're going, no, we've got this element, and we're going to use it to like push both walls further apart and get weird with it when we can. And choir, there's that seamless transition now, like running the same riff.
That riff transition every time the first time I heard it, I punched the air because I was like, fucking hell, that was so sick.
But like it treats Beneath the Row as like that was the catchy single of the two of them. Yeah. It sort of comes out of like the exhaust trail, but then doubles down on like the kind of krautrock jam element of it. And there's that feeling of just like being in a room of like incredible players like riffing with each other. And I think this album is more of a hub of like strange, haven't done that before ideas from Baroness than it is your typical Baroness rock songs. It's a much more challenging listen than, Purple, for example. And I think that's kind of a change in mindset that's maybe worth taking note of with Baroness. I mean, I guess the biggest refrain on the album probably is that I Remember Every Last Word part. And that's more of like a melancholic, yearning, sort of downtrodden melody than, a Take My Bones Away or Shock Me or whatever. It does go more for, like Magnolia is a very somber, beautifully put together melodic song that, again, it's carrying on the same strength that they've developed, certainly on Golden Grey. But rather than crowd pleasing you with maybe that element, it gives you that amazing, like, pure blue record heavy metal riff in there. And the melodies are more kind of evocative and affecting than they are like big sing-along necessarily, even though that song does reach that amazing, like, burst your lungs kind of crescendo and vocal looping part that's so good. But do you know what I mean?
I quite like that they save that sort of thing for the second half of the album, because, like I say, the first time I listened to it, I was really alienated by the first run of songs, because Choir, like you say, it's almost like milk that's been left out. Like it's this weird song that's slowly going sour before your ears, and then Shine, which has some of the, like you say, the really uplifting moments that Baroness are capable of, but could really turn on a dime into those weird riffs again. Moving into the second half, stuff like Anodyne and particularly Magnolia, not necessarily less heavy, but scratching that itch you expect Baroness to scratch, maybe. But in a way that they haven't done it for nearly 15 years. Like, when it bursts into that soaring bit, it's just like, I think I said it on the album club, but there's few bands that are just as enjoyable to listen to as Baroness.
Yeah, I mean, like, Anodyne is built on, like, a big thug stoner riff, like a Red Fang song or something, but it never hits, like, a big, shock me anthemic hook or anything. Instead, it doubles down on that kind of kookier side of Baroness. Well, I almost lose myself in the groove of that song, and like I lose track of where it is and where I am. It's like oddly trance-inducing. And then elsewhere, you've got like the vocal approach on something like Under the Wheel, which is really kind of creeping and sort of cooing, and it has these like screeching noise guitar builds that are like something off a Swans record or something.
Under the Wheel really reminded me of kind of like Vasia of Thrice at points as well. Just like,
oh yeah,
and some like the slower kind of like dramatic side of it. I don't know if that's just where I come from, but I got that sort of thing. Anodyne was one that, as you mentioned, like that to me, I was like, starts with a great riff, but then just goes off in really interesting sort of melodic tangents. That's what I like about like the back half of this record in particular, where they just everyone will just go off in a different direction with a guitar melody or a vocal melody. I'm just like, that I didn't expect that, and it's kind of just like, it's interesting to see where they take that and where they kind of loop that into something else. And there's just really interesting directions and song structures across this whole record that just kept me constantly engaged and never felt like it was kind of like washing over me. I was kind of just like, yep, okay, these are quite long, proggy songs. It just always perked my ears up at like every moment, every time where I thought maybe I was settling into something.
Yeah, and I think Baroness are a band that you can always kind of rely on them to know that you're going to get, the kind of the light with the dark and vice versa. Because if the beginning of the record is like surprisingly ugly and fearsome, you've got those little interludes which are just so warm and welcoming beyond most melodic songs, and then you get to Bloom finally. It's like, you are just able to do something that gorgeous like in your sleep. And even, again, early on with Last Word, I love that the Gina harmony on the "Oh My Sweet Oblivion" bridge is fucking sublime as well. And John Baisley's, like you, Elliot, he's always been one of my favourite singers, and I find Baroness's melodic approach, so kind of comforting and familiar, and they're able to kind of give that a bit of extra oomph with the vocal tracking on something like Shine or whatever. I think it feels quite short, even though like Blue and Purple doesn't seem quite right in my head, but they are both shorter than this. But this really feels like it gives you a plate of weird ideas in a like little tight digestible package. And like Golden Grey had so many tracks on it, it's suddenly shocking to get like only 8 real songs.
I could not be more positive about the length of this record. It is so but I don't think it's a short record. It's 48 minutes or something like that. It's
like 45
maybe yeah. But like for me, it was like, no, I've got everything I could possibly want. They and again, they're still quite long songs, and they do so much across them that I was never bored. I never felt it dragged. There was never lulls. The peaks and valleys, stuff like the dirge coming out the back of Choir felt like a really nice kind of just like come down after the weird darkness of that song. And so it rises and falls in a way that constantly kept my mood and like just mind engaged by it. So I never felt like there was a wasted second.
Yeah, I guess what I'm saying is this feels less like a big banquet of material and more like a weird little punch to the face that leaves you like slightly dazed and confused. And I think it's a fascinating record in that for, I guess, if people feel like they know what Baroness are and what kind of material they're going to make and rely on them to kind of get, this doesn't give you the obvious answers that Baroness might do.
Yeah, the last 3 records have all been pretty maximalist by comparison, like Yellow and Green, like official double album, Golden Grey sort of a soft double, and then Purple. Not a lot of songs, but really loud and lush with detail. And this record's not, it's not like a hardcore record, but it's much tighter and more maybe particular and deliberate with everything it does. And I think that's something where if you come to Baroness just expecting those rich, gorgeous melodies to like fill your ears for the whole time, I can imagine someone coming away from this maybe feeling unsatisfied. And initially I was like, okay, I think this is probably my least favourite Baroness record. But having heard it 5 or 6 times over the last week, already it's gone up in my estimations quite substantially. I think it is just a difficult record. For me, if they are moving away from the colour thing and this is going to be a new like second phase, that's really exciting.
Yeah, I think it's difficult in a way that feels more intentional than Golden Grey's difficulties, right? Which again, in terms of songcraft, I think Golden Grey is absolutely the equal of this record, if not slightly beyond. But in terms of, I guess, what the aim of the record is, this one feels more like they're kind of delivering what they're seeking to do. And I think like Golden Grey, the proof with this one will be in the long term, because it's not that immediate, right? And I think Baroness, approaching 10 years ago, were in that pocket where they were writing songs that were ready for commercial airplay as much as any other band in their scene. It's not cynically on their part; they were just brilliant at it, and that's where it took them. The wider world has kind of continued to sleep on Baroness and not lifted up to them to any kind of particular significant pedestal. They've just now continued on their kind of path artistically without any concern for that, and they are in a bit of a kind of an experimental mood and era at the moment where they're leaning into the kind of prog metal noisiness and eclecticism that the clueless tits at the Grammys aren't going to hear a whiff of when it comes to what passes their desk. And I think we should applaud them for that. Like again, they are free thinking, creatively minded underground musicians at heart, I think, and that's the direction that records like Stone are kind of taking them in.